The Trump administration's announcement to withdraw the United States from the Paris Climate Change Agreement is prompting swift reaction around the world. Jesusemen Oni has more.
While protesters rallied outside the White House, Paris lit up its city hall in green light in response to President Donald Trump's announcement to pull the U.S. out of the Paris Agreement on climate change.
The United States will withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord.
The landmark agreement consists of nearly 200 countries pledging to cut back on greenhouse gas emissions in an effort to combat climate change. Former President Barack Obama, whose administration championed the deal, was quick to condemn the decision. In a statement, Obama said, "The nations that remain in the Paris Agreement will be the nations that reap the benefits in jobs and industries created." Many world leaders, including French President Emmanuel Macron, also are criticizing Trump.
I do respect this decision, but I do think it is an actual mistake, both for the U.S. and for our planet.
The UN calls the withdrawal a major disappointment for worldwide efforts to promote global security.
The Paris Agreement was adopted by all the world's nations in 2015 because they recognize the immense harm that climate change is already causing and the enormous opportunity that climate action represents.
Anticipating the announcement, German Chancellor Angela Merkel earlier in the day reaffirmed her support for the Paris Accord and encouraged other world leaders to continue in the alliance.
For Germany, I can say that, of course, we will continue to fulfill our obligations under the Paris Climate Agreement as part of the European framework. I see it as a fundamental contract also for shaping globalization, and I'm glad other countries on the planet see it the same way.
The United States will join Nicaragua and Syria as the only countries that are not a part of the Paris Agreement. Jesusemen Oni, VOA News, Washington.
Well, following President Trump's announcement that the United States will leave the Paris Agreement limiting greenhouse gas emissions, VOA's Steve Barragona looks at the environmental consequences.
In Paris, 197 countries acknowledged climate change is a serious threat. They pledged major cuts in greenhouse gas emissions. Global emissions were on track to rise to 69 gigatons of CO2 per year by 2030 under business as usual. Paris would reduce that to 56 billion. The U.S. pledge makes up about 1/5 of the reduction. China, the world's largest emitter, contributes 27%, and the rest of the world makes up the remainder. But since taking office, President Trump has been working to undo the policies behind the U.S. pledge. From restarting the controversial Keystone XL oil pipeline to ordering a rewrite of the Obama administration's power plant emissions regulations.
Perhaps no single regulation threatens our miners, energy workers, and companies more than this crushing attack on American industry.
In some ways, pulling out of Paris is a formality, says the World Resources Institute's Andrew Light.
The Trump administration has already signaled that they want to do damage to what the last administration was doing with respect to our national targets on climate change. And they were going to do that regardless of whether they stayed in Paris or not.
But Light notes that U.S. emissions are going down regardless of what Trump does. Power plants are switching from coal to cleaner natural gas. Wind and solar are cheaper than fossil fuel power in many places. And, he adds, other forces beyond Trump's control are heading toward a lower carbon economy.
Many states and cities and businesses are already moving in that direction. They're going to continue on the policies that they're doing regardless of this administration. So climatically, not a huge difference, unless other countries start leaving Paris because the U.S. has left Paris.
China has said it will stay the course. India has ambitious plans for renewable energy. Light says it's possible the world will meet the Paris goals without the United States.
If, as predicted, China and India achieve their targets for 2030 earlier than they said they were going to achieve them, then you actually got enough tons out there in the world to make up that gap. But I'm not comfortable with those kinds of calculations.
And Paris alone was not enough to keep the planet from what scientists say are dangerous levels of warming. More action would be needed. And Light says under Trump, that is unlikely. Steve Barragona, VOA News, Washington.